Hello, everyone, and welcome to the University of Maine Cooperative Extension's Preserving the Maine Harvest webinar. I'm Kathy Savoie, and we will also be joined today by my other colleagues, Laurie Bowen as our producer and Q&A monitor, as well as Kate McCarty, who will be doing a live demonstration in our kitchen. So thank you for joining us today for what is our last Preserving the Harvest webinar for 2022. Many areas in Maine have seen a frost, or perhaps 2 or 3, which means that the harvest season is winding down here in Maine. But rest assured, there is still plenty of food to preserve in the fall. So we are here today to deliver some guidance according to the current USDA recommendations for preserving foods at home. The mission of the University of Maine Cooperative Extension is to help Maine people improve their lives through an educational process that uses research-based knowledge focused on issues and needs. Our educational programs are vast and include agriculture, horticulture, including the Master Gardener program, 4-H youth development, food safety, nutrition, and of course, home food preservation. And lastly, we want to let you know that the University of Maine is prohibited from discriminating on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, age, disability, and reprisal or retaliation for prior civil rights activity. Today, we are focusing on all of the different ways that you can preserve apples, from canning and freezing to drying and root cellaring. Apples can be preserved in many delicious ways. Some housekeeping before we get started. We do have our webinar set up so that you can hear and see us, but we cannot hear or see you. But we do, however, want to answer any questions that pop up for you during our presentation. So please use the Q&A feature that you see on your Zoom screen to ask questions as they come up for you throughout our presentation. And we will have a specific time when we field those questions. So once again, thanks for joining us today, and let's get started. So this month, farmers markets are bringing crates of apples to Maine consumers. We have Cortland, Empire, Jonah Gold, McIntosh, Zestar, and Paula Red, to name just a few. These are all varieties that you will see at markets and growing in orchards. I just came across a new variety to me at an orchard called the Pixie Crush. And here she is, a teeny tiny little apple with a lot of flavor. Some apples are better suited for fresh eating, while others are good for saucing, and some are uniquely suited for cider making. And yet other varieties are recommended for baking given their qualities. Kate will get more into the best apple varieties for making applesauce. But for baking, my favorite includes Cortland, Gravenstein, Gala, as well as McIntosh. Your apple farmer is also well-versed in understanding which apples are best for different purposes. So ask for some recommendations if you're unsure of what to buy for your specific needs. Let's spend some time talking about how to preserve quality. So for best quality, store your apples at a temperature of 32 to 38 degrees Fahrenheit with high humidity. Apples will store well in the refrigerator in a perforated or mesh bag to avoid trapping moisture, or just loose in the crisper drawer, which is going to offer a higher humidity because it is the crisper drawer. If you are looking to store large quantities of apples, Select a variety that is known for its storage properties, meaning it is late ripening or a winter variety. Here in Maine, it seems like we have an increased access to the Honeycrisp variety, which is a great storage and eating apple. These winter varieties will actually produce a better flavor after sitting in the right conditions for a few months. Store them in baskets or boxes lined with perforated plastic to retain moisture. Be sure to check your apple storage often for spoilage, because the expression, one rotten apple spoils the whole barrel, is certainly true. So you're going to want to keep an eye on those and pull out any that have started to spoil so that you keep the quality of those that haven't spoiled. Another concern that we want to talk about with storing apples is that they do naturally give off a gas called ethylene gas. And this gas can cause other produce to ripen and can cause other vegetables to become yellow, to soften, or even to decay more quicker than you would expect them to. So be sure to store your apples separately from other types of produce in your root cellar. So next, let's discuss some tips for freezing and dehydrating apples, and then we'll get into the different ways you can can apples. So as we've been saying all season, freezing is really a quick and economical way to preserve some of your favorite foods. Apples can simply be sliced, blanched, and frozen to use in baking. You can also very easily freeze applesauce instead of canning it. Remember that apples will darken once they're peeled, so remember to use an ascorbic acid to prevent that oxidizing from occurring. A commercial ascorbic acid product known as Fruit Fresh will keep cut apples from oxidizing. Simply create a dip from the powdered ascorbic acid and place your cut apples into it as you work. So that's powdered ascorbic acid mixed with water. Ascorbic acid is just vitamin C. So if you have tablets at home, you can also make your own dip from 6 500 milligram tablets crushed and dissolved into 1 gallon volume of water. To freeze apples, simply blanch apple slices in boiling water for 1.5 minutes, and then remember to cool them for that same amount of time in an ice bath. This cooling process is important as it stops the cooking and will keep them from getting mushy. Pack those blanched slices into freezer grade containers and cover with a simple syrup or granulated sugar. You want to use 1/2 cup of sugar per 4 cups of sliced apples. Remember to label your bags or containers with the quantity of apple slices, as well as any sweetener that you've added in the volume that you've used, so you can more easily use them in baking. So we recommend that you use apples within 8 to 12 months for best quality. Remember, that's a quality recommendation, not a food safety recommendation. We're going to switch gears and talk about drying or dehydrating. Apples are known for drying really well at home using an electric dehydrator. Homemade apple slices make a great lightweight and healthy snack. They're also a great addition to your homemade granola. So you want to wash and slice apples no more than 1/4 inch thick. Peel the apples or don't. The choice is yours. Apple slices with the peel will take a little longer to dehydrate than those without. And remember that the apple skin also will provide additional fiber and nutrients. So you may just want to keep those apple skins on. After slicing, soak apples in the ascorbic acid to prevent the browning, and then spread those drained slices on a dehydrator tray without overlapping them. You want to dry them at 140 degrees Fahrenheit until the slices are leathery and still pliable. So that's about 4 to 6 hours. You can also get a little creative with your apple dehydrating and sprinkle a little ground cinnamon or even nutmeg on the slices for flavor. Sugar is optional too, but remember that naturally occurring fruit sugars will become concentrated during the dehydration process. So we recommend skipping the added sugar if you're using a sweet variety of apple. Make sure to store your dried apple slices in an airtight container because they will absorb moisture from the air. But stored properly, dehydrated apples will keep for 6 to 12 months. You can also make fruit leather, which is a sheet of dehydrated fruit puree, which is a great way to use your homemade applesauce. And I can let you know, kids love fruit leather. You'll need a fruit leather tray to insert into an electric dehydrator, or you can use your oven, which is set at its lowest possible setting, and spread your fruit puree very thinly on a 9x13 baking sheet. A 1/4 inch of the applesauce fruit puree will take about 6 to 8 hours to dry at 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So now let's discuss the basics of canning apples. Apples are considered an acidic food and may be canned using a boiling water bath canner or an atmospheric steam canner. You'll find a plethora of research-based recipes for apple products that include everything from jellies and jams, juice, cider, spiced slices and syrup, applesauce, apple butter, apple chutney, and even apple pie filling. All of these can be preserved using the water bath canner or an atmospheric steam canner. We want to give you a quick side note here and say that Asian pears are in season now. They are often confused with an apple variety, but in fact, they are a pear. And research from our colleagues in Oregon has concluded that Asian pears require additional acidification to make them safe to can in a boiling water bath. Like other fruit, they can be canned in a light syrup, a heavy syrup, fruit juice, or even plain water. But different from our other fruits, they require additional acid added to each jar to make sure they are at a safe pH level for processing in the boiling water bath. And the recommendation is to add 1 tablespoon of bottled lemon juice per pint or 2 tablespoons of bottled lemon juice per quart. And we will include a link to a resource from the National Center for Home Food Preservation so that you have the latest information if you are going to be planning to can Asian pears. So back to our apple discussion. Apple pie filling deserves a special discussion as it is thickened with a unique ingredient. That unique ingredient is called clear gel. And this is a thickener that is made from modified cornstarch that will not separate upon heating. So it can withstand very high heat temperatures. Many other thickeners will separate at these high temperatures. Clear gel will also maintain its consistency over time, unlike some of those other thickeners, which can become runny or lumpy while sitting in storage. So clear gel can be somewhat hard to source. It is the recommended thickener for canning any type of pie filling. And we also want to make sure that people know that there are a couple of types of clear gel, and you do not want to use instant clear gel, as that product is intended for room temperature uses and not meant for the prolonged high heat that is used when canning pie fillings. So make sure you're sourcing the right type of clear gel. And once you have gone to the trouble of sourcing clear gel, you'll love the convenience of having quarts of canned pie filling on the shelf. You just have to pour the filling into a pie shell, and the hard work is behind you. So now we're going to switch gears, and we are going to join Kate McCarty in our demo kitchen to learn about canning a versatile crowd pleaser, homemade applesauce. Kate?
Hi, everyone. Thanks. I was, maybe you could see on my phone view that I was cutting up the fruit leather that I made. So I just wanted to show you the apple fruit leather. We're preparing for a program as samples for this weekend. And this was just some home canned applesauce that I had made from yet another demo, because I've been demonstrating a lot of applesauce lately on these special fruit leather trays that go in the electric dehydrator and then dried for 8 hours. And it is nice and pliable without being sticky. Like to the touch, it's fully dried but not crunchy. And then it didn't stick to the sheet, which is also a great victory, because sometimes it sticks and that's a nightmare. I think I did use a little bit of cooking spray on the sheet to keep it from sticking. So then I've also prepared the applesauce ahead of time. So I'll walk you through what I did there and then demonstrate filling the jars and putting them into the canner. So the applesauce that I made is using Macintosh apples. You can use any kind of apple variety you want, but certainly some are better for applesauce in that they break down faster. I had picked up a Cortland variety previously, and then switching to Max really made a difference in how quickly the applesauce was made once you've peeled and chopped up the apples. So I love the Max for that reason, because it happens so quickly. So just some general guidelines. So if you're looking to make a full canner load full of applesauce to really get the most bang for your buck out of your time, some helpful information from the National Center for Home Food Preservation is that 21 pounds of apples will make you 7 quarts of applesauce. And we'll send you the links to these publications so you can reference that. 3.5 pounds is 9 pints, which would be a canner load of pint jars. And about 3 pounds of apples makes 2 pint jars or 1 quart jar. So I used about 5 pounds of apples today, and I prepared 4 pint jars. So we'll see how I did. So some other suggestions for varieties of apples include Max and Cortland's, Paula Red, Ginger Gold, Ravenstein's, and Jersey Max. And again, if you use a mix of apples, that's great. It will give you a nice robust flavor, but some will break down faster than others. You can use a fully food mill. This is a way to get your applesauce nice and smooth if you have apples that aren't breaking down as much as you would like. You could also go in there with a potato masher. But when I was using these Max, I could just kind of use the back of the spoon to mash them up, and it's pretty much a very smooth applesauce with maybe a few chunks. So it's a good compromise. And then other things that are particular to making applesauce is that it is likely to burn. So I use this pot that we have that has a nice thick bottom. There's a different style of pot we have that has a much thinner bottom, and it always burns. So I've now exclusively switched to using this style of pot because it doesn't scorch. Because the scorching flavor will permeate the applesauce and could potentially ruin your batch. So you want to take care to avoid scorching your applesauce when you're making it. And then you can add sugar or spices if you like. They don't affect the safety of your recipe for canning. That would just be for flavor, for your personal preferences. I didn't add either. I like it without sugar and without spice. So we just have simply apples. I used the ascorbic acid while I was preparing it, so it's got a nice, pretty color. And then aside from preparing the applesauce, the additional work I did behind the scenes was to prepare the boiling water bath canner. So this is a large pot with a rack in the bottom. It's deep enough so that when I put the pint jars in there, they can be covered by water, by at least an inch of water over the top. So they're fully submerged, sitting on a rack, which helps protect the jars from breaking potentially if they were just resting on the hot metal surface of the canner. And then I washed up a few pint jars, like I mentioned. I put in a half pint, like a jelly jar, just in case I get to my last jar and can't fill a pint all the way up. I might be able to fill a half pint, so we could can that instead. But if you have leftover applesauce, of course, you can just store it in the refrigerator and enjoy it as fresh eating. So I'm gonna do 2 pints at a time. So you don't want your jars or your applesauce to cool down too much while you're filling your jars. So just take out a quantity that you can work through efficiently and not have the product cool down. It's nice to have everything be the same temperature. So you have hot jars, hot applesauce going into simmering water, so about 180 degrees Fahrenheit. And that will help give you a higher quality product and prevent your jars from breaking. So other than that, I've got my applesauce prepared here. I'm putting these jars on a sturdy cooling rack. You could also work on a dish towel. Again, that's to help prevent the jars from breaking. If you put them right on the cold counter, they could break. So protect them with something. And then I've got our jar funnel, which will help me get all my applesauce into the jars instead of making a mess. So you'll just add a few ladlefuls. And when you're filling up your jars for canning, you don't just fill them all the way to the top, you leave a little bit of space. And this space is what helps to create a vacuum seal inside the jar. So we call that space head space. And each product, like type of food that you're canning, has a different headspace. So applesauce is 1/2 inch. And so I'm going to use a headspace measurer to accurately measure that I have a 1/2 inch of space up at the top of these jars once I've got them filled pretty close to the top. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it for now. And then I'll come back and really measure that headspace precisely. Okay. So with my headspace measuring tool, we'll see the second step up from the bottom here. Let me check my Zoom screen to make sure you can see that on the camera. So these little notch steps on the end are measure 1/4 of an inch. So the second step from the bottom of the tool measures 1/2 inch. So you got to get down on the level with it, eye level with it, and see that it's just touching the applesauce there. And I've got a small teaspoon that I use to make adjustments to either add some in or take some out. Okay, so I'm happy with that headspace. I'll do the same to the second jar. And then applesauce is a thick product. And so there's going to be a lot of trapped air in there. Apples are also starchy fruit. And so applesauce is prone to something called siphoning, where the heated product inside the jar will start to ooze out of the jars after you've canned it. And so trying to get all the air out as best you can, the little trapped air bubbles in there, will help reduce the likelihood of siphoning. If siphoning occurs in your applesauce, so if you notice that the head space is greater than 1/2 inch after you canned it, or if you just see applesauce coming out of the jars, it's okay as long as the jars continue to seal. So if you get a fully sealed jar, despite the siphoning, they're okay to store. Just make sure you clean them off really well, because the applesauce that's on the outside of the jar could mold. And so we recommend you remove the screw bands, wash them down really well. So I'm happy with my air bubbles, and I'm going to remeasure the headspace just in case that changed it, which it didn't. And then proceed with putting the lids on. So I'll wipe off the rim of the jar where I got a little bit of applesauce. You want to have a nice clean contact between the lid and the jar. They're very warm. And then apply your dome lid. So this one little flat lid goes on, and the screw band. And the screw bands you put on until they're fingertip tight. So just using only the strength of your fingers to tighten them, not your whole hand. And that's so that we are allowing for air to escape during the canning process, so that 1/2 inch of headspace, the air is going to get pushed out during canning, and you want to make sure that you're leaving room for it to escape. If you over tighten the rings on these, it could cause the jar to break, or your lids to buckle, since the air is going to get out one way or the other. So after that, these jars are ready to go back into the canner. So they can hang out in there while I repeat the process with the remaining jars, because this applesauce is nice and cooked, so it's not going to hurt it if it starts to warm up in the canner while I work on the other jars. And actually, that's what we want to happen. We want to keep things warm while we're working. So I'll finish filling these jars, put them in the canner. Go for 2. I might be pushing it. But I'll put these 2 jars and the remaining jars into the canner and put the lid on, and then turn up the heat and bring this water back to what we call a full rolling boil, so a vigorous boil. And that's actually when the canning process begins. So applesauce in pints at sea level here in Falmouth gets canned for 15 minutes. Oh, this is not even going to be enough for one. I might just switch to a half pint. So applesauce gets canned for 15 minutes. So you want the jars in there being boiled for 15 consecutive minutes. After 15 minutes is up, you can take the jars out and let them cool. And then I'll show you how to finish the jars because we have some ones that I did ahead of time, so you don't have to wait for the canning process to happen here on our webinar. So let me just finish this one jar, and I'll be able to concentrate on showing you the other jars after they've been canned. So this is a little half pint jar. This size is a little wide mouth half pint, so it's an 8-ounce jar, but it's just nice and squat. I think they're pretty cute, so I like to use them compared to the 8-ounce jelly jar, which is taller. But it does use a wide mouth lid, so it's a little different. All right, so headspace is happy. Remove the air bubbles. It's fine. Wipe the rim off. And we're using a wide mouth lid. So one lid rings on until fingertip tight. And we have just enough applesauce that isn't enough to can, but will that make a great snack for lunch. So we'll carry on with putting the jars in the canner. And I'm just going to take out any extra jars that I had in there just in case I needed them. Once your last jar goes in, you also want to make sure you have at least an inch of water over the tops of all of your jars. So I'll use my headspace measure to see that, yes, we have at least 1 inch over the tops of the pint jars. I just put that in there, rested it on one of the jars, and I could see that there was over an inch of water over it. So with that, I'll turn the heat up on the canner. And when that comes to a boil, I'll begin timing 15 minutes. But in the meantime, I have some jars that I have previously processed. So after 15 minutes of time is up and you're taking your jars out of the canner, you'll return them to this cooling rack and you'll let your jars cool undisturbed for 12 to 24 hours. So that's how long it can take for your vacuum seals to form. And then once the jars have cooled completely, you can come back and check, make sure the seals have formed. I put the screw bands on here to pretend that these are fresh out of the canner. Once I'm happy that the jars have sealed, that this little button in the middle of the lid is depressed, pulled in, then I'll remove the screw bands, clean them off of any applesauce that might have leaked out during the heating process, wipe them down, and then label and date them. So I just wrote applesauce, and I did these last month, but I would write 10/22 on my batch that I'm doing today. And then these are ready to be stored in a cool, relatively dark place, and try and use them within 12 months for best quality. Now, if you're using this in baking, perhaps you would use it up all at once. But if you're just opening this jar and snacking out of it, you'll want to put it in the refrigerator and make sure you use it within 2 weeks, because we didn't add any sugar, which would potentially help preserve it. And once it's opened, so this is just apples in a jar, and it could go bad pretty quickly. So just be conscious of the fact that your home canned food will spoil faster than the commercial equivalent. And you want to make sure you eat it so that you don't end up inadvertently wasting it. Okay, with that, I think I'm approaching the end of my demo. Let me double check my notes for you. I would like to add that if there's a jar that doesn't seal, or if you have applesauce that's left over that is more than maybe you'd want to eat in a fresh capacity, applesauce freezes really well. So you want to make sure you're putting it in your freezer in a freezer grade plastic or glass container. These mason jars, the regular mouth pint, are not good for freezing because of the shoulders on the jar. So you want to use a wide mouth pint, which is a straight sided jar, or an 8-ounce jelly jar. So something that doesn't have that neck or shoulders, which could cause it to break either while it's freezing or thawing. But if you canned in this and a jar doesn't seal, or if you just want to reuse this jar or use this jar to freeze it, the 8-ounce jelly jars are great. And then to thaw it, just move it into the refrigerator when you're ready to eat it. All right, I think that's it. So we'll go back to Kathy and then we'll take your questions in a little bit.
Great demo, Kate. Thank you. So one of the things that I wanted to emphasize after we've seen Kate's great demo is that you remember once you have finished the processing time for your applesauce or whatever it is, that you give it the 5 minutes of time to wait in the canner with the lid off and the heat off, and then you pull it out of the canner. And we may have time to see Kate do that as we work through the rest of our webinar. So let's discuss ways to use apples once you've got them canned or in storage, and then we'll take your questions. So I do see there's at least one question in the Q&A box. If you've been listening to us and you have other questions, now's the time to add them and we'll get to them soon. One great way to use applesauce beyond enjoying it as is to substitute applesauce for fats and oils in baked goods. And what I'm talking about with baked goods are usually quick baked breads or cakes. These are two things that this substitution that we're going to talk about work really well in. This is an easy way to cut down on the calories that are in those baked goods. Consider this: a cup of unsweetened applesauce has 100 calories, and a cup of oil has 1,985 calories, close to 2,000 calories, right? So if you can substitute part of the oil or fat in a baked good, you are on your way towards reducing the total calories as well as the total fat in your baked goods. That's a win-win. So you can use applesauce or any other fruit puree for half the fat in your recipe, although you may need to reduce the baking time by 25%. So here's an example. If the recipe calls for 1 cup of fat or oil, use half a cup of fat or oil and a half a cup of applesauce. This combination will help to retain moisture of your product. And I personally have a family favorite cake recipe that does call for a cup of oil. And I have kept it as a family favorite. Nobody's noticed the change by simply replacing the oil with a half a cup of applesauce and a half a cup of oil. So keep that in mind. Also related to apples is pressing cider. This is a fun, traditional fall activity. And we want to go down through our list of tips to keep in mind when you are preparing to make cider at home. And these are all really grounded in food safety. So some things to do. Make sure you have washed the apples with clean water to remove any debris just before you're going to start making your cider. Keep the press cloths and racks off the floor and in a clean place between batches. Make sure those the equipment and the cloths are cleaned and sanitized before using them. Some advice is to blend in some tart apples to increase the cider's acidity. Also, we want to make sure people remember that you have to use food grade plastic or stainless steel containers to catch your cider. You don't want to use containers that are not food grade safe, as that is a food safety concern. You also want to heat the cider to 155 degrees for 10 seconds. And again, that is a safety measure so that we decrease the risk of foodborne illness associated with homemade cider. When we store cider, it's 40 degrees Fahrenheit or lower if you're not bottling it immediately. And those bottles do need to be cleaned and sanitized as soon as the cider is pressed. So also we want to make sure people know they should not use spoiled, moldy, or defective apples. We also do not want folks to use drops. Those are apples that have fallen off the tree and are then exposed to anything on the ground. And we also don't want you to expose the juice to air and insects. If you've pressed cider before, you know that the sweet smell of that cider is going to attract those bees as well. So be on the lookout for that. Don't allow spoiled or partially spoiled apple to enter the grinder. So go through, check what you're using for cider making, and remove any of those apples that don't meet the quality that you want to have in the long run. Don't leave cider at room temperature for longer than 2 hours. We will include additional resources on how to make a sanitizing solution at home with those resources that we always share after our webinar. So now let's take a look in our Q&A box, Laurie, and see what questions you as our viewers have.
Okay. First off, we have a question from Nikki. Do you have to add sugar when freezing, or can you just blanch and freeze?
So you can choose to do either. Think ahead. This is what I always encourage people to do. Think ahead. Think about how you're going to use those apples in the long run. And if you do plan on using sugar, you can add that when you're freezing those. And just make sure and on your label indicate how much sugar you've included so that you don't end up with too much sugar or too little sugar for your end result.
Thanks, Kathy.
And
we also have a question from Linda. Can you go over how to freeze the apples? Do you soak them in ascorbic acid and water, or cover totally with simple syrup?
Kate, do you want to jump in for that one? You've done some.
Sure.
All right.
Let me see, let me get my apples.
I think she's even got some prepared stuff to show you.
Yeah, so I did both ways, I think. So I definitely use the ascorbic acid. I found when freezing fruit that if you don't and it turns brown, it really does affect, I mean, at least personally, I get weirded out by it and I don't want to eat it. So I like to use the ascorbic acid to make it, to maintain the quality. And then you can use either sugar or no sugar. So I did both as a demonstration for our webinar last month. So if you do want to go back and watch the freezing fruit and vegetables, I specifically demonstrated freezing apple slices without any additional sugar, which is what this is, in a zip top bag. And then so I just sliced them up, put them in the ascorbic acid while I was working, but then drained them and then packed them into bags, leaving a little bit of space at the top. Squished all the air out of it while I sealed it, and then squished them so they're nice and flat and froze them like this. And then I also did apples in simple syrup, but I also used the ascorbic acid, put them in the simple syrup, and then ladled it into a rigid side container. This is a pint. And then I also put a little square of freezer paper over the top. So this helps to keep the apples below the surface of the syrup, which will protect them. And then it also keeps any ice crystals from forming on the surface as well. So you can do both ways. So sugar is not necessary for safety, although it will protect the quality of the apples as they sit over time.
Thanks, Kate. Our next question is, I don't have a dehydrator. Can you still dehydrate apple slices in the oven? My oven goes as low as 200 degrees Fahrenheit.
You sure can. Yes, you can use your oven to dehydrate fruit. You'll want to maybe err on the side of slicing them a little thinner, and then your dehydrating time will be shorter because you're heating them at a warmer temperature. So 140 degrees is recommended when you can control it with the electric dehydrator. In your oven, just put it on the lowest setting possible. It's helpful to get a little external, or it's an internal thermometer, but a separate thermometer that you can put in your oven to tell you what the actual temperature of the oven is. And then if you need to crack the door open, that could also get the temperature down as well to let some heat escape while you're working.
Yeah, and we've also seen some images that show people using a fan on the outside of their oven, pushing air towards their oven to help get that air circulating in there, and to also help keep the temperature a little lower, because a lot of ovens, like you said, have their lowest possible setting at 200 degrees. And we want to get that temperature a little lower for dehydrating apples.
Okay. So our next question is from Audrey. And how do you prep apples for a food mill? How long to cook? And can you cook them whole, or must you peel and de-seed them?
So yes, it is recommended to then go just continue the process like you were not going to use a food mill. So you still have to peel them, core them, chop them. You could cut them up a little bit larger, like a more rough chop, if you're going to use the food mill, because the food mill will do the work of breaking them down for you. So you put them in a pot with a half a cup of water, just enough to like keep them from scorching as they begin to cook. And then you just ladle them into the food mill once they've softened, because they need to be partially cooked to be soft enough to be pushed through this food mill. So it's got like a little paddle in there that it goes over the fruit and extrudes it through, and then a little wire that drags along the bottom to help move it along. So this will give you a really nice smooth fruit leather. I mean, applesauce, but also fruit leather.
And I really like the advice that Kate gave earlier about making sure you're using a high quality pot to cook down your applesauce, because it does have a lot of natural sugar in it, and it is quite easy to scorch your applesauce when trying to cook it down.
Okay, looks like that's all we have for questions right now.
Okay, I just want to add that I did, our canning pot did come to a full rolling boil. So I started my 15-minute timer once I saw that boiling. We've got about 12 minutes left. I don't think, well, we won't all still be together in 12 minutes, but I just want to let you know that we are canning this applesauce.
All right, well, thanks, Kate. And here is a list of our recommended resources. And you will get all of these resource lists included in a follow-up email. One of our featured resources is the Maine Heirloom Apple Guide, published recently by the author of the Portland Food Map. It is a detailed guide of Maine apple orchards, the varieties that they offer, as well as some tasting notes. So look for an email later today with resources and recipes from today's topic. We want you to all stay tuned for an announcement next spring for our future webinar topics. You can always revisit any past topic we've covered on our page by viewing our past webinar recordings. We will also share a link to an evaluation and a certificate of completion. And we'd love to hear from you in our evaluation. If you have suggested topics for future webinars, we'd love to hear from you as far as what you'd like to see us providing to you. So also related to our evaluation, if you do complete our evaluation and provide us with your US mailing address, we'll send you a free Headspace tool, which is used when canning. That's what Kate demonstrated in the kitchen to make sure she had the right headspace for her applesauce. So I'll ask Laurie if there are any other questions in the Q&A box.
We do not have any more questions.
All right. Well, it looks like our timing is right on today. So once again, thanks so much for choosing to spend some of your time with us. And we look forward to hearing from you through the evaluation. And again, stay tuned for all of those resources we've talked about coming to you in an email later today.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good